So, I'm desperately unhappy with my life. Now, this isn't a sudden realization I've known for the past 5 years, but I've always been a very passive person, so I didn't attempt to do anything about it. Except when things got really bad and changing something, anything really, was the most I could do to stop myself from going over the rails. But even then, I'd quit the second I wasn't in danger of doing something stupid. So, what changed? What finally made me actually want to fix the bigger problem instead of putting a temporary band-aid on it like before? Well, this isn't my first time attempting to change my life around. I've tried before and I've failed. I've made countless plans only for them to fall apart because of two things. One, I didn't have a way to get around. Two, I didn't have money. But luckily, I finally got a car and enough money from Christmas that I can actually see myself having a decent shot at this. But before I fix the problem, I have to know what the problem is. So what is the problem? What do I want to change? Well, the short answer is just about everything in my life. The long answer is one. When it comes to my own life, I didn't get to decide where I wanted to go. Depending on where I was going, I didn't get to decide what I wore sometimes, or how I got to do my hair. Not feeling in control of yourself is very suffocating, especially when you're trying to grow into yourself. Or it just feels like you're this doll and everyone's pulling your strings. You go where they tell you to go. You do what they tell you to do. You wear what they tell you to wear. My backbone was practically non-existent. I can't keep living like that, but every time I attempt to gain some control of my life, it resulted in a passive-aggressive fight where nothing was outrightly said, but hinted at that I was being disrespectful or overreacting. And over the last few years, I've just gotten complacent. I don't like arguing, so it was easier just not to pick a fight. But I'm tired of letting myself be worn down. 2, I don't feel comfortable in my own room. And I know that's a very stupid point to bring up, but before I moved here, my room was the guest bedroom. And it still very much feels like the guest bedroom rather than my room. This past year was the first year I really felt comfortable putting stuff out, like my pictures on the mirror, or actually using my bookshelf, but it still felt like it wasn't my space. There are still other people's things in my closet. I have to put my shoes under my bed instead of in my closet because there's so much stuff in there. But I've slowly started moving these things into the actual guest bedroom, and once I have a bit saved up, I really want to do a room makeover. 3, I'm really shy, like painfully shy, and sometimes that makes me come off as cold and emotionless, and knowing that makes me really insecure. I mean, I'm insecure about a lot of things, but this makes me feel 12 times more awkward, which doesn't help my communication skills. I'm really bad at talking to people. I feel like I'm Chandler for Friends, but just like the real version. I try too hard and most of my jokes fail. There have been times where I've made a conversation so awkward that I physically had to walk away. One would think that texting would make me more comfortable, but it doesn't. I'm bad at texting and texting back. I'm not one to use emojis, so sometimes I'll text something, and out of nowhere, a voice in my head would be like, that sounds really cold. And I'll have work myself up about it to the point where I have to put my phone down to revisit it in 5 minutes, but I'm really forgetful. And I don't really use my phone when I'm at home. So sometimes I'll put it down and not pick it back up for 2 hours, and I'll feel bad So sometimes I'll set timers, but when the timers go off, I'll forget why I set them, so I forget to respond again. 4. While that hasn't ruined friendships, I feel like it definitely has put a damper on them. And with all that was previously said, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not someone with a lot of friends. But I do try really hard to keep the ones I have. I try to invite them to hang out with me, and no matter how awkward and annoying it makes me feel, I try to reach out regularly. But despite that, I still feel like all of my friends just see me as an acquaintance. Nothing I do will ever bridge that gap. I'll never be anyone's first choice, and I know that. I've tried to be okay with that, but I can't. I try to I still try to stick to people and make things deeper than what they are. I need to learn how to accept things as they are instead of trying to force things. 5. I don't know how to be alone, but I'm alone most of the time. My loneliness frequently gets to me to the point where I escape through social media, more specifically vlogs. I watch a lot of teenage girl vloggers, mainly because I am a teenage girl. That's what I relate to, that's what I can use as my escape, but that's like putting duct tape over an ever-growing crack. The duct tape will only help for a bit if it helps at all, and that's how I feel about vlogs. They make me happy in the moment, but when the videos finish, it just makes me realize how lonely I am. It makes me want to go to art museums with my friends, or go-kart racing, or mini golfing, or take a paint class, or just go out to dinner together, but my friends don't want to do those sort of things, at least not with me, or they can't afford to. Attempting to make plans with my friends is like pulling out my own teeth. It's difficult, and in the end, I'm still the one that loses. 6. I constantly feed my insecurities. I'll compare myself to basically anybody. Even if they're doing a smidge better than me, they're still doing better than me, and I hate that with a passion, but instead of bettering myself, I'd rather just hate. It's so much easier than actually putting the work in. Instead of focusing on bettering myself and fixing what I can, I'd rather focus on people who are actually working towards what they want. I literally have an entire folder on Instagram called Insecurities, and it's just filled with girls I find pretty. The sole purpose of this file is just to remind me that I'll never be as pretty as these girls, so why bother? And reading this out loud makes me realize just how fucked up that is. I want to delete it. I've been so close to so many times, but I've never followed through. And I don't know why. Looking at the file doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel like absolute shit. Usually afterwards I'll cry until I fall asleep, and I hate that. But I just don't compare myself looks-wise. I'll compare myself in any way possible. Oh, that person's literally been drawing for 5 years, and I've been drawing for a week, but they're still better than me? Then why continue this when I'll never be as good as them? I'll constantly line myself up against people who I know I'll fall short in comparison to, and then once I've fallen short, I'll dig myself into this rut that I'll stay in for weeks. 7. My laziness is my biggest flaw. I recognize just how much it affects my life. My laziness lowers my grades, it ruins my hobbies, it ruins my health. I think, given time, letting it go unchecked would ruin everything. I don't know what happened, it never used to be like this. I very much so consider myself a planner. I constantly make step-by-step plans for every and anything. I have so many plans, but I'm too lazy to actually follow through on them. And when I don't follow through, I feel defeated, but I cannot force myself to get back up where I left off. But every now and then, when I'm actually pumped and ready to do work, I'll screw myself over. I'll bite off more than I can chew, which makes me, a very easily overwhelmed person, overwhelmed. Like most people, I take a step back to take a deep breath. But surprise, surprise, our old friend appears. In such an unbelievably short time, my laziness sets in. One example is just how long this video took. It was supposed to take 1 or 2 days, but I kept taking break after break after break, and next thing I know, I'm on day 7, I think. If I had just committed to the task, I would have been done in half the time, but no, I kept putting it off. And now I'm complaining about my own mistakes. 8. That's another problem. I complain a lot. Some would even say I spent this entire video complaining. Complaining is one of the few things I'm actually good at, but it comes at a cost. It makes the few people around me miserable, and I understand that. Like, who wants to listen to someone that's constantly complaining about things that are most likely their own fault? Most of my problems are my own fault, and I complain about them instead of, fixing them. I complain and complain and complain as the problems grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Complaining doesn't fix anything. My problems still grow and grow. Having to sit and list everything I think is wrong with my life was really saddening. Having to admit that just about all of these are my fault was heartbreaking. But having to keep living my life like this is emotionally tolling. I would rather do this 100 times over than live another year like last year. I know that sounds extreme, but I'm so unhappy right now. My lowest days don't even feel that low anymore, since I'm constantly hovering above my lowest point. Everything has been so very lackluster lately, like I've forgotten what it's like to enjoy living. I have to change. I have to. I just don't know how to yet.